Good morning to the Honorable Adjudicator, my opposition, and audience. My name is Sain Chiralba, here to affirm that the Catholic Church should endorse a presidential candidate. I will be discussing the reasons and the corresponding law regarding our affirmation, but before all that, I'll start with the definition of terms. Number one, endorse. Political endorsement is a public declaration of one's personal or group support of a candidate for elected office. If an individual endorses a presidential candidate, they are voicing their support for them. Number two, support, to promote the interests or cause of. Number three, canon law, the system of laws and ecclesiastical legal principles made and enforced by the authorities of the Catholic Church. In the Catholic Church, a visible society of baptized Christians professing the same faith under the authority of the visible head and the authority of the invisible head. Now, to begin with our proposition, we believe that the Catholic Church has the right, as any individual in any democratic country, to endorse a presidential candidate. The Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines, or CBCP, does their part in educating voters. As the former CBCP president, excuse me, Archbishop Socrates Villegas said, voters should refer to their conscience and to church teachings in electing the country's leaders. This is how the church implicitly endorses leaders, focusing on the characteristics of leaders that should be elected in office. Biased as it may seem, the Catholic Church sides on the candidate with high regards to good morals and clean track records. Like the election is a struggle between the forces of good and evil. And based on the Catholic faith focusing on good morals, who's complaining? It is the right of all citizens, churches, and their members included to decide whether or not to endorse a presidential candidate or any political candidate for that matter. Church leaders or members of the clergy have the right and duty to participate in giving opinions on how the country should be governed. This is incumbent upon them as citizens. When the Catholic Church denounces injustice and violation of human rights and lives, these are covered by the free exercise of one's religion mentioned by the Constitution, thus should be respected by the state. And this, in fact, is covered by the separation of church and state, declaring that no law should be made respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. The free exercise of religion covers the Catholic Church's right to endorse a presidential candidate they have unitedly discerned on, to have closely passed their criteria that include respect for human rights, upholding the rule of law, preferential option for the poor, and rejection of political dynasty, to name a few. The Church reserves the freedom to preach the faith, to teach her social doctrine, to exercise her role freely among men, and to pass moral judgment in those matters regarding public order when the fundamental rights of a person or the salvation of souls requires it. During the law, when people were killed, during martial law, when people were killed, tortured, or detained, on the war on drugs, where extrajudicial killings were believed to have been perpetrated by the authorities themselves, or when corruption is glaring, the Catholic Church, in all its morals and teachings, should stand up against them. As the Code 287 of Canon Law of the Catholic Church states, and I quote, clerics are always to do their utmost to foster among people peace and harmony based on justice. And if the utmost would take, excuse me, and if the utmost would take endorsing a presidential candidate when the common good demands it, when justice is grossly violated, when the good of the church requires it, or when moral values are at stake, then we firmly believe that the Catholic Church may, and in these cases should, endorse a presidential candidate. For we are in a state of dire desperation. We believe that we need good governance in this time, in this trying time, where EJK is present, where there is a pandemic, where the pandemic affects, when the governance affects the pandemic and the people dying, then we firmly believe that the Catholic Church may, and in these cases, absolutely should, endorse a presidential candidate. It's an honor to share our side. That is all for our side and respectfully, I thank you. Have a
Good morning, Ms. Speaker. I have here only just a few questions for you.
all right.
First of all, you have stated that the Catholic Church is urged to vote according to their conscience. Yes,
I never said urged. Oh wait, yes,
but you say
the
that they
urge.
must vote according to their conscience. Yes, yes,
I said that the CBCB, the former CBCB president,
exactly.
said
Yes
that.
or no questions only, ma'am. Yes.
All
So,
right.
would you say that do you acknowledge Canon Law 375, in which it is stated that the bishops shall be the teachers of doctrine and priests of sacred worship, in which they, meaning that they are to teach and set moral standards for the laity, for the Catholic Church? Do
Yes.
you acknowledge this, ma'am?
Yes, I do.
Canon law, yes. And
Yes,
so you
I do.
acknowledge that conscience of the laity is influenced by the moral guidance of the clergy,
Yes.
as is it is their duty. It is their duty as from Canon Law 375. Yes. So you're saying that the bishops can in fact influence the people.
Yes.
Yes. And so you acknowledge that that is a promotion of partisan.
Could you elaborate, please?
That is a promotion of partisan political activity. Yes or no,
Define
ma'am?
part. May I request
Partisan, it
adjudicator
is
may yes.
adjudicator.
What are you requesting?
May I request that she defines partisan so I may answer the question properly?
Yes, ma'am. Partisan means to be biased.
No, bias is preconceived.
Bias is preconceived. All right. Let's move on to our next question. Do you think the Catholic people will follow your proposed endorsement?
Some might, yes.
Some might. That's your stance. Are you aware of the Philippine Trust Index?
No.
No. The Philippine Trust Index is a survey conducted in 2017 for the elections, in which it is stated that 93% of the Filipino people rely on the church for social political decision making. And do you acknowledge this?
93% of the Filipino people,
Yes.
only 83% of the Philippines is Catholic. How is that
93% of the
possible?
Filipino people, ma'am.
92% of the people, including those who are not Catholic, rely on the church.
93% of the Filipino. It's a yes or no question, ma'am.
No, I don't acknowledge that.
No, you don't acknowledge this. And so you reject the presented statistical evidence, yes?
Yes.
Yes, all right. That is all. I'm satisfied with you.
Time.
A very pleasant day to my fellow members of the Interscholastic Debate Society, and of course our esteemed adjudicator, Regina. I'm your first negative speaker from St. Andrew's School, and our proposition today discusses whether or not the Catholic Church should endorse a presidential candidate. But first, before anything, let me reiterate the events of the interpellation. Upon being asked whether the conscience of an individual is influenced by their religion or by the bishops whose duty is to provide moral guidance, she said yes. And so she admits to the influence that the clergy has on the lay faithful. Next, upon being asked on whether or not they acknowledge the Philippine Trust Index of 2017, they said no, which is faulty for statistical evidence to be rejected, because that is something that is proven by fact. Knowing this, let's go back. Let me reiterate also the definitions of the affirmative speaker. They defined endorsement as a public declaration of support, and the Catholic Church as the ecclesiastical hierarchy, which we agree with as per canon law 204 and 207, so long as there is collaboration between the clergy and the laity. Now, to begin my constructed speech, let's go back to the question. Is it practicable for the Catholic Church to endorse a presidential candidate? My team believes that no, it is not. Why? We have a few arguments. First, endorsement leads to a partisan election, which is unconstitutional. What evidence do we have? The best example that we could provide is General Register 205728 was brought to the attention of the Supreme Court after a tarpaulin was posted at the front of their church supporting senatorial and vice presidential RH law. And now, this was against Article 3, Section 5 of the 1987 Philippine Constitution, which states the free exercise and enjoyment of religious profession and worship without discrimination or preference. Meaning, whether or not an endorsement is mandatory, it still goes against our country's laws because the Supreme Court declared this general register as unconstitutional. And not only our country's laws, but the laws within the Catholic Church as well, which one, the Gaudium et Spes, a pastoral constitution authored by the Second Vatican Council, says, and I quote, "The Church, by reason of her role and competence, is not identified in any way with the political community nor bound to any political system. She is at once a sign and a safeguard of the transcendent character of the human person. They should not participate in political activity or in political community." What else? Canon 287, paragraph 2, which was cited by the first speaker but did not mention paragraph 2, in which it is stated that they are not to have an active part in political parties and in governing labor unions in judgment of competent ecclesiastical authority. The protection of the rights of the church or the promotion of the common good requires it. Meaning, endorsement is not only unconstitutional, it is against canon law as well. Which brings us to our second argument. Let's say if we allow the endorsement to follow through. If the endorsed candidate were to commit crimes against Catholic social teaching or the common good, the church will be held accountable. Now, the first affirmative speaker has failed to define the common good, which is a very important factor in the church's involvement in socio-political activities. And Stanford Encyclopedia for Philosophy defines it as the universal welfare of the people. And the universal welfare of the people relies on good governance, which means that that common good is not only the activity of the church, but the activity of society as a whole. Now, J.L. Cornelia. Now, if the Catholic Church were to release a public statement of endorsement for a presidential candidate who ends up lacking moral values that reflect the Catholic social teaching, the Catholic Church will be blamed for the votes turning up in the candidate's favor, as mentioned in the interpellation. According to the Philippine Trust Index, 93% of Filipinos put their trust in their churches to guide them in making socio-political decisions, which includes choosing a presidential candidate. What evidence do we have that this can happen? J.L. Cornelia, on his study titled Christianity and Duterte's War on Drugs in the Philippines on 2019. Interviews were conducted on two pastors, Pastor Julius and Pastor Nick, who admitted to being in support of Duterte during the campaign period. Pastor Julius is cited to say, and I quote, "Duterte is God's way of punishing Philippine society for its sins," end quote, which goes directly against Canon Law 287, paragraph 1. Clerics are always to foster the peace and harmony based on the justice which are to be observed among people. Which leads us to our final.
10 seconds.
That is all. Thank you.
10 seconds. You still have 10 seconds.
Oh, it is by these arguments that it is not practicable for the Catholic Church to endorse a presidential candidate. That is all. We rest our case.
Good afternoon. Good morning, Azlina.
Good afternoon, Speaker. Good morning, Speaker.
What is your final percentage here? How many percent of Filipinos rely on Catholic teachings?
93% according to the Philippine Trust Index.
93%. All right. Now, do they teach Mass every Sunday?
Yes.
And that's where they impart morals, correct?
Yes.
But are you aware that not all 84% of Catholics go to Mass every Sunday?
I acknowledge this.
Meaning they are not well versed with the Catholic morals just
That
yet.
is an assumption.
All right. But should it be present in Catholics?
Yes.
All right. Now, is it common good taught by the church?
Excuse me?
Is common good taught by the church?
Yes.
All right.
It is the Catholic social teaching.
All right. Now, you stated in your speech Am I correct? Did you mention Code 287 of canon law in your speech?
Yes.
Clerics are always to do their utmost to foster among people peace and harmony based on justice?
Yes.
Yes. All right. So what if the utmost means endorsing a candidate?
That is not the only way
That
to
is not
uphold
the
justice
only-
and peace. It's not the best way either because it's against the Constitution and canon law
How so?
and the words of the Pope. First of all, canon law states that it is within 287 too. Also, the Constitution also does not permit, as we said during the General Register of 208, General Register of the Diocese of Bacolod versus the Comelec, that it is unconstitutional for the Church to have endorsed those
All right. I'm gonna cut you off right
senators
there.
and
Thank
vice
you.
presidents.
All right. Now, do you believe that the Philippines has proper governance
Yes,
currently?
the Constitution
right.
does. Yes.
As of now, do you think they have proper governance?
Yes.
All right. Are you aware of benevolent neutrality?
No.
All right. That protects the freedom of rights and religion. I'll move on. And how would you say that the Philippines has proper governance?
Because the Constitution has rights that are upheld
Are they upheld? They're upheld. So
in
they're
the
upheld,
Supreme
yes?
Court. Yes, I have provided evidence of such.
All right. If you say so. Thank you. That'll be all.
Thank you too.
Greetings to the honorable adjudicators and greetings to my fellow honorable debaters. We affirm that the Catholic Church should endorse their presidential candidate in the Philippines. And why is it necessary? But before I come to my own arguments, let us first have a look at what my worthy opponent has said. My opponent states that common good does not acknowledge that the Catholic Church teaches that. In addition, she did not acknowledge the Benevolent Neutrality Act, which protects the intervention of the Catholic Church as protected and stated by Article 3, Section. It is not partisan or biased because they choose the candidate whether they are capable of serving all of the branches of society, whether religion, what religion here in the Philippines. Why are you restricting a group of people that advocates life and dignity of the human whole to family, community, and participation, rights and responsibilities, preferential option for the poor, the dignity and the rights of workers? Moving on. And of course, they're fighting for the justice of the people, especially for the poor. The Catholic Church or the Catholic community can endorse their presidential candidate. Why? There are good reasons why the Catholic Church has 100% rights when it comes to endorsing choosing their own political leader or political candidate, to be precise. The first one is 1987 Constitution of the Philippines, Section 6, the separation of church and state shall be inviolable. It means that the state shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. Sounds like a contradiction, you might say. But I would like to clarify that the Catholic Church is a community of Filipino Catholics. And we are the citizens of this country before we are members of the church. This means that they or we all possess the rights to endorse and the rights to choose our own candidate. Support the claim. Cardinal Sin was inches away from endorsing the former President Corazon Aquino because it was necessary. And that leads me to Article 3 of the Philippine Constitution, is the Bill of Rights. It establishes the relationship of the individual to the state and defines the rights of the individual by limiting the lawful powers of the state. And one of the most important political achievements of the Filipinos. Citations from the Classic Journal of Asian Studies, Volume 4, Issue 2 from the University of Cambridge. So this means that the people can criticize or take action if the government is abusing its power. There are 83% Roman Catholics in the Philippines, 6.01 are Muslims, 9.13 are Protestants, and other Christian religion, Aglipayan, Orthodox, INC are 3.38%. This is from Stanford University's Ethnogeriatrics and Philippine Census data from the Philippine Statistics Authority. Participated in one of the most historical moments of our country and one of the reasons why we still have democracy. And it is the participation of the church in the EDSA revolution, to throw off the dictatorial regime of former President Ferdinand Marcos. Secondly, some might assume that the martial law has nothing to do with the status quo, but according to professor of history named McCoy from the University of Wisconsin, and I quote, 3,257 killed, some 2,520 or 77% of all victims were salvaged, tortured, mutilated, and dumped on a roadside for public display. It is also reported that 737 appeared between 1975 and 1985. And in today's status quo from the United Nations Office of High Commissioner of Human Rights estimates that at least 8,663 people had been killed. So it is much worse compared to martial law. Move on. Remember that the political ideology of the Catholic Church is political conservatism, meaning to say that they advocate to preserve the aesthetics, culture, and institution, and political philosophy. We will retain the best features like justice, compassion, and perseverance. And to conclude, the Catholic Church should necessary to endorse their own leader because it's necessary and they've been part of our history, serving the poor, feeding the hungry, and of course, they helped us to regain our democracy. And they are just practicing democracy and free speech. The Muslims can endorse their political leader. Endorsing a senatorial aspirant, Samira Gutok, according to Muslim version 2022. She has a strong support in Mindanao, specifically Marawi. And of course, the Buddhists can endorse their leader, the Hindus can
10
endorse their
seconds.
leader, because this is democracy, and that's the status quo, and that's how it works. Thank you, and it's an honor for me to share our side. Have a nice day.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning, Sheska.
I am okay. I have prepared some questions here. So according to your constructive speech, you've mentioned that the Catholic Church will choose the candidates, correct?
Yes,
Do you
Cautiously.
agree that,
they will choose their candidate cautiously.
okay, it's just a yes or no question? No.
Okay.
Moving on, do you agree that when you choose, you exclude an option?
Can you elaborate?
You've mentioned that, yes, the church will choose its candidates. So if you agree that the church will choose its candidates, so you also agree that when you choose, you exclude another option or another candidate besides the chosen by the church?
Yeah, but it's not biased.
It is not biased.
No.
When you choose a person and you do not choose another person, it is non-partisan. Okay,
No.
moving on. Acknowledging to my question, moving on to my next question. Acknowledging that the Catholic Church is a community, then where does the authority reside?
The authority, of course, second, there's two reasons. There's from the Pope, and here
May I cut you respectfully? May I, as a specific person only, acknowledging that the Catholic Church is a community, then where does the Catholic Church reside? Its authority resides.
Sorry, but it's a hierarchy. So it's a hierarchy.
So where it is, to the bishop or to the people?
To the bishop and the people. It's always two sides, not just one.
Then you are implying that once a bishop or a representative of the Catholic Church endorses a candidate, he is already choosing a side, and that's become biased or partisan.
Sorry, what was it again? You're lagging. You're quite lagging.
Okay. I will repeat my
Yes,
question.
please.
You've mentioned that it's both for the people and the bishop. Then if it's for the both, you are also implying that a bishop or the representative of the Catholic Church, when endorsing a candidate, he is already choosing a side, which leads me to my argument that it is biased.
It's
Okay,
not
now moving on
biased.
to my question, I am satisfied with your answer.
Okay.
To my third question, don't you exclude the minorities within the Philippines?
What? Exclude the minorities?
Yes, it is according to your constructive speech. You have already mentioned only few percent
Okay.
of the Philippines are not Catholic. So you are excluding them. Am I correct? Yes or no?
I'm not excluding
You're not
the
excluding
minorities
them.
because I stated in my
Okay, that's
speech
I am satisfied with your
okay.
answer. Thank you. You've mentioned the articles or the issue during the martial law, but it
Yeah.
is in the past, correct?
Yeah,
So
and
are
I
you
compared
implying
it
that
in
it is the
today's
same in
status
the present
quo.
day? And
I compared it in today's status quo.
why are you comparing to
Your
the
Honorable
status quo?
Speaker.
Is there a martial law happening
Time.
today? Thus, it is not
There's
it is not
injustice.
necessary. It is not
Injustice.
necessary. Thank
It
you.
is
Time,
I
time,
am
time.
necessary.
not satisfied.
Good morning once again. I am Maria Francesca Samantha K. Cavarles, and today I will be discussing why is it not necessary for the Catholic Church to endorse a specific presidential candidate. So my first argument is the neutral stance. According to Gaudium et Spes, number 76, following the spirit of Vatican II, the value of this provision is to protect the Church freedom to preach the faith, to teach her social doctrine, to exercise her role freely among men, and also to pass moral judgment in those matters which regards public order when the fundamental rights of a person or the salvation of souls requires it. In short, this means to maintain the authority to pass the moral judgment on the political realm, the church leader has to keep his or her neutral stance. Which leads me to my second argument. The role of the clergy is to foster peace and harmony based on justice, which is to observe among people. They are, according to canon law 287, paragraphs 1 and 2, they are not to have an active part in political parties and governing labor unions unless in the judgment of the competent ecclesiastical authority, the protection of rights of the church or the promotion of the common good requires it. However, we stand that there is no need for the church to endorse due to the current situation do not require the promotion of the common good due to its my third argument, which is the Catholic Church has demobilized by the end of post-authoritarian era. Thus, there is no need to remobilize because first, my evidence, no verdict on extrajudicial killings. Second, no Supreme Court ruling on EJK or the extrajudicial killings. According to human rights lawyers last September 22, 2017, asked the Supreme Court to order the heads of the Philippine National Police, the Commission on Human Rights, and the Department of Justice is to investigate all cases of extrajudicial killing and arbitrary executions, which have been reached several thousands in a year. This investigation have been further delayed by the President Rodrigo Duterte, ordered the PNP not to share case files with human rights investigators without his clearance, which leads to my third argument. The International Criminal Court has yet to provide a verdict because it's still under pre-trial chamber of the court authorization approval. So this preliminary examination is not an investigation. Now, moving on to my fourth argument, it is the task of the lay faithful to directly intervene in political affairs. According to the Directory of the Catechism of Catholic Church, it writes that the priest will remember that it is not the role of the pastors of the church to intervene directly in political structuring and organization of social life. This is the task. This is the part of the vocation of the lay people acting to their own initiative with their fellow citizens. Now, my fifth argument, the clergy have formed the lay people in the priest's own idealized image to be Christian is not to be non-partisan. So this is according to the encyclical Fratelli Tutti number 176 that historically in the Philippines, the clergy have formed the lay people in the priest's own idealized image. So technically, the Christian is asked to be non-participant when it comes to political stuff. And lastly, so my sixth argument, which is related to my fifth argument, which is that tackling specific issues can lead to being political partisans. So even as priests limits themselves to teaching of moral principles alone, it must be admitted that it is actually interpreted by some as partisan politics because of the actual circumstances. This is according to Second Plenary Council of the Philippines, pages 343 to 344. This means, for instance, preaching against the evil extrajudicial killings or blatant government corruption is seen as politically partisan because it hits certain political programs and personalities, which includes all of my arguments that endorsing a presidential candidate would lead to being biased or partisan. I believe that I have stated all my arguments to support that it is not necessary for the Catholic Church to endorse a presidential candidate. That will be all. I rest my case. Thank you.
According to I forgot to greet you again, Cheska. Again, hello,
Good
greetings.
morning. I
Good
prefer
morning.
Ms. Cavarles, not Cheska. Thank
Oh.
you.
Sorry. So, according to Canon Law 287, they are not have an active part in political parties and in governing labor unions unless, in the judgment of competent ecclesiastical authority, the protection of the rights of the church or the promotion of the common good requires it. Are you sure that the church's endorsement is unnecessary?
Yes, I have stated my arguments why there is no need for that Canon Law 287 paragraph 2, right?
Okay.
So there is no need.
Yes
unless
or
I-
no?
I've said it yes, and I stated my reasons why. Thank you.
Does the church fight for justice for the people? Do they fight for justice? No, the church. Yes, of course. So there's no verdict that the government commits EJK in the Supreme Court, right?
Yes, according to my research, there is not
Okay.
yet a verdict.
Can you cite the article or the research paper?
Are you saying that I will repeat again my statements or my
Yeah, can you just
practical speech?
cite it?
Oh, cite it.
Where is it from? Yeah.
It is from the as the Supreme Court order, the Supreme Court ruling on extrajudicial killings.
Okay. Are you aware that the president appoints their own chief justice in the Supreme Court?
Yes, it is in his power.
Can you so you stated the ICC part, right?
Yes.
Are you aware that when we removed our country's membership in the ICC, it is unconstitutional?
I think that is irrelevant because that is not a part. It's just
But you
one of
stated
my
the
evidence.
ICC in
It
your
is part of
speech.
my evidence. I'm sorry, it is part of my evidence, but I will not membership. The membership itself is not included in my statement. It's just an evidence.
Okay. Are you aware that the Catholic Church is a community that comprises a leader and the people?
May again your audio is a little bit.
Okay, I'll repeat.
Okay,
Are
thank
you aware that the Catholic Church is a community that comprises a leader and the people?
Yes.
You said that the church should foster. How can you foster peace if you do not endorse and promote the common good?
There is other ways. According to the Catholic social teachings, there are other ways that we can foster peace.
Which
It
is
is not only
stronger, the laity or church authorities to guide the people?
Again,
Which is stronger, the laity or church authorities to guide the people?
neither of them. We work in collaboration.
Yeah, that's what I said, right? Okay. There is injustice in our country, right?
I'm sorry.
There
it
is
a little bit
injustice in our country.
There is injustice in our country.
It is present, right?
It is an assumption. The question itself is irrelevant because it's an assumption.
It's
The
not an
injustice part.
assumption.
The injustice part, I would it's not my part to say that there is an injustice when there is no facts presented in front of me.
It's not an assumption, okay?
But there is no facts.
There is facts.
I
There
mean, you have not stated, so
statistics.
it will be my opinion. I'm sorry.
So you're opinionated now.
No, if you are going to ask me if there is
Time.
injustice, it will be opinionated. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you.
Greetings to the honorable adjudicator, to the audience, to my opponents, and to my teammates. I'm here to establish the beneficiality side of why the Catholic Church should endorse a presidential candidate in the Philippines. But first, I would like to address some points about my opponent's speech. For the practicability side, they did not acknowledge that common good and good governance are teachings of Jesus Christ, taught to the Catholic Church. She also agreed that not all Catholics go to Mass. So how are we to say that the said 84% or 80+% so are familiar with the teachings of the Catholic Church? We need intervention. We need a reminder immediately, especially under these pressing times of a pandemic and EJK, which they refuse to acknowledge. In addition to that, the necessity speaker pushed that we exclude minorities, but their team states the relevance of common good, which the church practices and preaches. And we are here to defend the church after all. She reiterates that martial law is not comparable today, which is incorrect. There were extrajudicials done then and now. Martial law is not equal to present injustice, but injustice is present in martial law, thus giving grounds to the two situations being comparable, meaning church intervention is extra necessary. They also stated the neutral stance, which protects the moral doctrine and passes moral judgment under breach of fundamental rights and extrajudicial killings. That sounds like a breach of fundamental rights, which brings me to my main points. First and foremost, the Catholic Church is already involved. Majority of the church leaders in the past, including Archbishop Socrates Villegas and Archbishop Romulo Valles, who have both held high positions in the CBCP, highlight the electoral process as a part of their sacred duty, urging us to register for voting. In addition to that, Radio Veritas, an establishment that is church-run and was active during the EDSA revolution, a political feat, they have launched in 2021, their 2022 election campaign that sought to return morality and ethics. They have an established duty the moment that they got involved to uphold their teachings. According to CNN in 2021, among the adult Filipinos in the Philippines, there are only 46% who actually attend religious activities. And among those 46%, only 41% were Catholics. Meaning, these are the people who are hypothetically well-versed with Catholic morals. We need the church to remind us of the value of life and the value of people. This I will further expound in my next 2 points. Number 2, a religion protects their values and values lives. While we acknowledge that we cannot be representative of all religions, aren't most, if not all, which is what we're defending here, common good, all religious influences and interests protected by the sanctity of life. Catholics, Protestants, Christians, they're denominations that follow Jesus Christ's teachings to love thy neighbor as you love thyself, based on the 10 commandments, one of them being, thou shalt not kill, meaning you don't allow people to be hurt, right? Muslims practice the value of life in the Quran. If anyone kills a person, it would be as if he killed the whole people. And if anyone saved a life, it would be as if he saved the life of the whole people. That kind of goes along the lines of Article 3, Section 1 of the 1987 Philippine Constitution, do you not think? Where it states that no one shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Now, don't you think that the support for extrajudicial killings that have been enforced to further the cause of the anti-drug war done by the current administration goes against Article 3, Section 1, because it has been proven, according to the Human Rights Watch, that police falsify evidence to justify killings. 12,000 drug users, as I can now provide my opponent, and a part of them had falsified evidence. That is not just, that is a breach of fundamental rights. That is grounds for neutral stance to be broken. Would the Catholic Church leave it up to chance if they could do something about it? Would they leave someone like Bongbong Marcos to be voted? Marcos has expressed practicing the Catholic faith, but he does not uphold their morals. Which brings me to my 3rd point. Proper practice of spreading church teachings. In spreading the teachings of the Catholic Church, we endorse the moral teachings of the majority of religions in the Philippines, as my team has established. We have laws to protect the interests of practicing and spreading our religions. So the grounds of the opponent saying that it's in the law, well, this is also in the law. Article 111, Section 5 protects the interests of Article 3, Section 5 protects the interests of free exercise of religion. In addition to that, the Benevolent Neutrality Act, which I mentioned earlier, protects the intervention of the church in some state matters based on Article 3, Section 5. You might be thinking, are we just to promote someone who is kind? But what if they cannot give the needs of the people? Such candidate is possible, Sir Lenny Robredo, who has provided feeding programs, COVID monitoring programs, etc. We acknowledge that she is not perfect. By Catholic teaching, all humans sin though. And if you think about it, even sainthood is bestowed to those who sin and who learn through Jesus' teachings. Therefore, in the Catholic Church endorsing her, they do not make an idol out of her, but they enforce, support, and manifest the majority of the traits that the Church looks for in a candidate that can give the
Time.
needs of the people
10
who shows the
seconds.
most potential to respond to all criteria immediately under a pandemic. And I believe I have stated our case. Thank you very much.
Hey, good afternoon, Mr. Speaker of the affirmative side.
Good
I
morning,
just have
Ms.
a few questions for you. So for my first question, do you acknowledge different religions?
Yes, I have stated it in my speech.
Okay. Then you agree with me that there are different practices of which those then do you agree with me that there are practices of which those religions have different practices and beliefs?
Some are based off of each other.
Yes or no,
Casey?
ma'am? Yes or no, ma'am?
Yes, on some grounds.
Okay. Then this means that despite the universality of common good, different religions have different practices on how they will provide the concept of common good. For my second for my second question, you have reiterated that not all Catholics go to church, yes?
Yes, I've stated so.
Yes, and you have said that this means that not all would know about common good.
By virtue of my
Yes or no,
speech?
ma'am?
Oh, yes, I guess so.
Okay, yes. So do you acknowledge that you mentioned relation of martial law to the present time is considered as equivocation?
I likened their
Yes or no,
situations
ma'am?
because,
Yes or no, ma'am?
yes, I liken the two.
Okay, then if you agree with me that it is that their relationship is equivocation, then this issue is not is not a necessity to our topic.
I
So for my
disagree,
next question,
but okay.
if you stand that the Catholic Church should endorse, do you agree that they will only endorse one?
They would only endorse one candidate
Yes.
by virtue of our
Yes or
definition.
no, ma'am? If you stand that the Catholic Church should endorse, do you agree that the Catholic Church will only endorse one?
Yes, initially, of course. One.
Yes. So this will. So if you say yes, that if the Catholic Church will endorse, they will endorse only one, which it means that endorse with it means that the Catholic Church will be considered as partisan. Okay.
I believe not, but
I did
okay,
not ask
proceed.
any question. Okay. So you said that the Catholic Church is already involved in endorsement in politics, yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Time.
Hey everyone, I'm the third negative speaker and I will be presenting on why it is not beneficial for the Catholic Church to endorse a presidential candidate. For my first argument, not all citizens of the Philippines are Catholics. According to the Asia Society, more than 86% of the population is Roman Catholic. And even if that is a huge percentage, practices of the Catholic Church may contradict with practices of the percentage that consists of other religions. Regardless of their religious beliefs, each has their own moral values to discern who to vote. Meaning, people, regardless of their religion, still decide on which decision to make based on their own principles, which can be influenced by either experience or what they see and hear, for example, in documentaries, articles, books, and etc., even if the common good is considered as universal. For my second argument, it is the task of the lay faithful to directly intervene in political affairs. It is not beneficial to endorse a specific candidate since it promotes partisan, and it will be more beneficial to focus on endorsing approved moral guidelines. According to Father Jerome Ceciliano, the spokesperson for Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines, if a Catholic representative, like a priest, for example, is going to support a candidate, then that is his personal choice as a citizen. But the Catholic should not support any candidate or political party as an institution. He said, and I quote, "It is the lay people who should mobilize, not priests." And according to the Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines, they wrote, and I quote, "Negatively put, the clergy can teach moral doctrines covering politics but cannot actively involve themselves in partisan politics. In practice, religious men and women are also included in this prohibition." Thus, the Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines rallied the lay faithful towards principled partisan politics in the document Lay Participation in Politics and Peace, written in 2009. They wrote that we remind the laity that it is within their rights as well as their duty to campaign for candidates they believe to be competent, honest, and public service minded in order to reform our country. That is why the Catholic Church has not yet endorsed any presidential candidate in the past to avoid future issues or scandals regarding what the Catholic Church believes in which can be possibly brought up. And for my third argument, it is not beneficial because the church endorsing a presidential candidate is unconstitutional. There's a concept that we call the separation of church and state that according to Article 2, Section 6 of the 1987 Constitution, of the church and state shall be inviolable, meaning never to be broken. This forbids governmental establishments or preference of a religion and preserves religious freedom from governmental intrusion. And according to Article 3, Section 5 of the 1987 Constitution of the Philippines, no law shall be made respecting an establishment of of religion or prohibiting the exercise thereof, the free exercise and enjoyment of religious profession and worship without discrimination or preference shall forever be allowed. No religious test shall be required for the exercise of civil or political rights, meaning no law shall be made respecting a religion, including the Catholic religion. This is because there are specific morals for which for example, the pro-life versus pro-choice that will conflict with beliefs of Catholics if laws will be made from it. And another example is what we have the General Register 205728, as mentioned by our first negative speaker. On February 21, 2013, the Diocese of Bacolod posted a huge tarpaulin that consists of names of who supports the reproductive health law and who does not. They call those groups Team Buhay and Team Patay. The Diocese of Bacolod then reasoned that it is the religious speech, but the Supreme Court then said, and I quote, the enumeration of candidates on the face of tarpaulins precludes any doubt as to its nature as speech with political consequence and not religious speech. That is why endorsing, mandatory or not, is unconstitutional, meaning not in accordance with political constitution. With those being said, having the Catholic Church endorse a presidential candidate in the Philippines would not benefit the country, but rather give problems like having conflicts about practices between the Catholic Church and other religions that they don't have in common. And with that, I'm again the third negative speaker of my side, and I rest my case.
Good day to my opponent, Allison. I shall now
Good
begin my
day.
questioning. Are you aware of Article 2, Section 6 of the Constitution?
Yes.
That the church and state shall be, yes. But are you aware that it only applies to public property and money by virtue of Article 6, Section 29?
No.
You are not aware, okay. Then by virtue of Benevolent Neutrality Act and my previously stated laws, the church and state can go in hand with some affairs, correct? Yes or no?
I did
shall
not state
suffice.
that in my speech.
But it is relevant to my point. So I would prefer you answer, please.
Can you repeat your question?
Of course, by virtue of Benevolent Neutrality Act, which I stated, and the two previous laws I stated, the church and state can go hand in hand with some affairs, correct?
No.
Okay. But politics is not a stated exemption in Article 6, Section 9. Moving on. You did not state whether you accept or reject clearly our definition. So do you accept ours?
What definition have you
Of
presented?
course. Political endorsement is a public endorsement of one's personal or group support of a candidate in an elected office.
I think that is the role of the practicability
accept?
speaker of the negative side.
So reiterate if you accept or reject.
I accept.
Okay. Then do you acknowledge that the church is made of leaders and people by virtue of hierarchy?
Yes.
Meaning that people can endorse too by our definition that you accepted.
Can you repeat?
Meaning that people can endorse too by virtue of our definition, which you accepted.
Oh.
But we said a political endorsement is a public endorsement of one's personal or group support, and the people is a group. Moving on. By virtue of your teammates' interpolation of my teammates, you say that martial law is not comparable to the current, correct? I believe necessity?
Yes.
Yes. And you were, she was trying to invalidate his argument, correct? Okay,
I believe
that is
that
grounds.
is that connected.
Okay, moving on. But were killings present during martial law?
Yes.
And EJK is present currently, which your teammate has deflected.
I think you should focus on my speech, not my group speech.
But you represent your team. Moving on then, with EJK and pandemic, don't you think of all solutions should be immediate if quality can be delivered as well?
Yes.
Yes, if faster and safer is possible, right?
If what?
If faster and quality is possible, that is
Yes.
more ideal. Yes, that ends my interpolation. Thank you very much.
Hello, once again, a very pleasant afternoon at this point to everyone within our Interscholastic Debate Society. Why should we win? Well, first, let's acknowledge the glaring technicality that the calling out of our names breaches the debate ethics because it makes the debate personal. Now let's move on to the speakers of the affirmative side. For the first speaker, rejected statistical evidence, specifically the statistics presented by the Philippine Trust Index, which should not be because it is factual evidence backed up by a reliable source. Next, the second speaker exceeded time and had raised his voice, which is a sign of informality. What else? He provided null evidence when he mentioned that Jamie Cardinal Sin almost endorsed former President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, an event that did not happen at all and is not acceptable as a basis. It's an unreliable source presented by the second speaker. And now the third speaker. Third speaker agrees that despite the universality of the common good, different religions present it in different ways, which goes against their acceptance that they would accept the minorities. What else? She agreed that comparing martial law to the current situation is equivocation. Thus, she recognizes her own committed fallacy. Next, upon being asked whether or not the Catholic Church is already involved in endorsement politics, she said yes. But her argument is vague and null because she just assumed that the Catholic Church has endorsed without even stating one candidate that has been endorsed. Next, the third speaker said that we did not specify whether or not we agreed to the definitions. However, the practicability speaker specifically did. She did specify that we agreed to the definitions, not the parameters. And finally, the third affirmative speaker kept on asking questions that were already answered in the constructive speech of each of the other speakers, other than the beneficiality speaker, which is irrelevant and unnecessary. And therefore, these are the arguments by which we stand that we must win this debate. We have presented all evidence according to both Constitution, both the Philippine Constitution of 1987 and the canon law. And thus we believe that we must win this debate. And thus we rest our case. Thank you.
Good morning to the honorable adjudicators, members of my opposition, and my own. I'm here to establish why we won by bringing up our strengths of why we were able to establish. It is evident that we are well read and informed about the topic. We have delivered and dissected our confidently delivered, well-formulated speeches to clearly establish why we won this debate. Starting with our practicability speech, it contained all the factual definitions and complete terms, which were consistently used throughout this debate to support our side. It cited reasons as to why the church is held and stopped by nothing to pursue the greater good and justice that they aim to achieve, which we continually reiterate is necessary in our current circumstance through politics. It is also contained the present problems that our country needs to resolve, and the Catholic Church would aid. Her interpellation questions the interpellation questions of the opposition were unclear and weren't rebutted properly, proving the question asked to be irrelevant. The opposition also that included 92 or 93% of Filipinos, she was inconsistent with the number and didn't clear until asked, relied on the church, but only 83% of Filipinos are actually Catholic, and she failed to establish or mention how much of those 93% were actually Catholic, making that statistic unreliable to the topic at hand. On to our necessity speech: rights, statistics, history, and present situations. Check. They were included, proving that the effects and consequences of the Catholic Church endorsing a presidential candidate are already present. It contained evidence of the Catholic Church being brought into politics, changing the course of the country for the better. For example, the involvement in the EDSA revolution. The interpellation questions were easily answered, for things questioned were already mentioned in the speaker's speech, leading to nothing new being brought up. And finally, our beneficiality speech, yours truly, delivered by me, contained the already present stance and nature of the people involving the church. It contained the statistics to polished statements in the speeches beforehand. It proved why Catholics' faith lines up with laws and characteristics, contrary to what my opponents have said, since they said that it is in the law, while our stance is also supported by law, as it is sought after in electing a president. My interpellation was infiltrated with a lecture, not really combating any points of the speaker. More of. Finally, We would like to point out a few errors in the opposition's argument. They stated that bringing up martial law was irrelevant to the topic and equivocation at present, but the injustice of the said situation is still present in our current time. They said that the presence of injustice was based on opinions. However, multiple cases were cited proving the injustices present in our today's society. They also acknowledged that EJK did not have a Supreme Court verdict, but does that discard the voice of the people and the media article cited? We would like to correct the part of the reply stating that my teammate used a situation involving Macapagal when the example was involving Corazon Aquino. They didn't acknowledge that common good and governance are taught to us by the church. In addition to that, they also invoked the black and white fallacy. And I believe that we were able to establish way more based on our strengths than the opponent's weaknesses. I believe that is why we have established why the church should endorse presidential candidate. Thank you very much.